The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen, I know you know how important a NATO summit is, but Donald Trump, of course, still hasn't learned, and certainly demonstrated today he has no idea how a president is supposed to sound, look, behave in any way at an event like that.
It's not a policy wonk. I think we know that. And certainly has less interest in probably being there than nearly any president in modern history. You could correct me there, but yeah, that's my take
true,
too.
Absolutely. And yet, for some strange reason, he goes. Why not just stay home?
He wanted to see his buddies in Turkey, right?
There you go.
That's the strange part about it. Wanted to talk about his call with Vladimir Putin. All of it feels, if you were to script it, Lawrence, if somebody were to pitch it to you to script, you would say that's too far-fetched. But here we are.
It always is. It always is. It's all too crazy. Thanks, Jen.
No doubt. Have a good show, Lawrence.
Thanks. Well, Graham Plattner is now in his second day of pretending that he is still a candidate for United States Senate in Maine. This program has never done a single segment about Graham Plattner. Graham Plattner has obviously never been a guest on this program. I've never said anything publicly about Graham Plattner until the first parenthetical mention of the current Plattner crisis in Maine that I made at the beginning of last night's program. And I will explain later in the hour why Graham Plattner never made the cut of what important stories this hour would focus on until tonight, when we will finally focus on Graham Plattner. But first, we begin with the Republican who is arguably worse than Graham Plattner on Graham Plattner's worst day. In fact, we know he is. Donald Trump took his endless self-humiliation tour to the NATO summit today in Turkey, where he babbled incoherently as usual, claimed his war in Iran is not a war, even while he was carrying out new military strikes in Iran, and he humiliated himself on social media, this time with this post. Donald Trump is pretending that this is a photograph of Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni looking up at him at the NATO summit. But the image is actually taken from the G7 summit in France a month ago, and European television is reporting that the image apparently has been faked.
As we can see in our actual video, she is not gazing up at Trump. She simply laughed. And it is very likely that the meme that Trump posted saying restraining order needed against Giorgia Meloni, that it has been edited with video editing tools or even AI tools, and very much shared by Donald Trump to goad Meloni ahead of the AI summit and fuel this claim that he's sharing that she is very much enchanted by him.
And so it appears that the Trump clowns on the government payroll who generate this stuff may have used AI to open the eyes of Italy's prime minister in that image, which is built on an image from this video.
Let's have a very quick look at that video.
So we become friends again. We're friends again.
Always been friends.
Now, it is, in fact, in that moment in which she laughs there. I know it's difficult to catch in that video, but this is very much the frame that the restraining order meme that Trump posted, that this was taken from.
And so, of course, a reporter asked Donald Trump today, quote, "Can you clarify what you meant with your social media post yesterday with respect to Prime Minister Meloni, that Truth Social post with the restraining order?" To which the 80-year-old person who has no idea how to behave at a NATO summit actually said, quote, "I don't know." That is his answer to, why did you become the first and only president of the United States in history to do something so insane and disgraceful as to post this thing, this crazy, demented thing? And Donald Trump's crazy, demented answer was, "I don't know." And the next words he spoke after saying, I don't know, were, I think she's a nice person, actually. Now, when an 80-year-old does something transgressive or says something transgressive and is asked why he did it, and he says, I don't know, that is when the family is supposed to intervene. That is when Donald Trump Jr. and the others are supposed to gather around the old man and protect him from himself. The reporters could have asked, Mr. President, did you mean that she needs a restraining order if she's going to be that close to the person who said this?
Just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even know. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the. You can do anything.
It's too bad those victims who he treated that way did not have a restraining order against him. The only president in history who has publicly revealed his specific method of sexual assault, as you just heard him do, goes to the NATO summit where he reminds the world of how physically dangerous he proclaimed himself to be to women. Not one Republican member of the United States Senate today condemned Donald Trump for that disgusting social media post, not one of them. And not one current Republican member of the United States Senate refused to support Donald Trump's last election years after they heard him in his own voice on that video describe his specific method of sexual assault. That was okay with every single Republican senator. And after saying, I don't know today to the question of why he posted that madness, he then rambled into saying this about Italy's prime minister.
She refused to get involved with the Hormuz Strait, or you could also say just Iran. She refused to get involved.
Yes, like every other country in the world. But she alone gets that deeply sick and perverse post by Donald Trump. And while he was at it today, Donald Trump said his war in Iran is not a war.
The war with Iran, or whatever you call it, it's not even a war, it's a military operation. It's a denuclearization. That's really what it is, of Iran.
When he's communicating, two things are happening. He's using words that make absolutely no sense. That's the verbal piece of the communication. And then there are other hand gestures, which are equally incoherent and inexplicable. Always the same hand gestures, always the same. They mean nothing. He can't stop them. It's an involuntary movement. It's not up to him. His brain doesn't choose that. It's just happening. And it's as incoherent as his speech. In his war that isn't a war, his military commanders announced at 5:15 p.m. today, quote, U.S. Central Command forces have begun launching a series of powerful strikes against Iran to impose heavy costs for targeting and attacking commercial shipping crewed by innocent civilians in an international waterway. The U.S. strikes are in response to Iranian attacks on 3 commercial vessels that were transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's demonstrated aggression was unwarranted, dangerous, and a clear violation of the ceasefire. So that's how Donald Trump's war is going today. Donald Trump was asked about the war that he promised to end on day 1 of his presidency, a different war, Vladimir Putin's war against Ukraine. And this is what he said about the war that he absolutely promised during the presidential campaign that he personally could end on the first day of his presidency.
It's too bad it took so long, but I think there's going to be, something's going to come out.
And here is what the most incoherent person who has ever attended a NATO summit with a speaking part said today about his deranged obsession with Greenland.
It was Greenland that, and it continues to be, that should be controlled by the United States, not by Denmark. And when they wouldn't go along with it, and with all the money we spend to help them with Russia, and we don't have to spend any money, We could remove all of our soldiers out of Europe. Because as you probably noticed, Europe's a very different place than it was 20 years ago. A lot different, much different. It's a much different, and they better be careful with immigration and energy. If they're not careful with those two things, you're not going to have a Europe anymore. Okay, thank you very much.
You're not going to have a Europe anymore. That's what Donald Trump told Europe today. Needless to say, and I really do mean needless to say, Europe will still be Europe long after Donald Trump is gone. This is the person who every Republican senator and every Republican member of the House of Representatives supported in the last presidential election. That's who they wanted to be president. That's who they wanted at NATO summits. The breathtakingly stupid guy, stupid enough to say, you're not going to have a Europe anymore. Leading off our coverage tonight is Congressman Adam Smith, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman Smith, what is your assessment of how Donald Trump's war in Iran is going tonight, now that the firing has started again?
Yeah, I mean, it's going as badly as it's been going from the start, and it proves that it was a very, very bad decision to start it, because basically what we're doing now is we're fighting with Iran over trying to get them to open up the Strait of Hormuz and how much we're going to pay them to do that. And Iran's taking it one step further to exactly how they open up the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump keeps pretending it's going to be completely open and, right back like it was before. But Iran keeps saying, no, you're going to have to go down these routes. Maybe you'll have to pay a toll. And always remember, the Strait was open before this war started. We have made no progress on eliminating Iran's nuclear weapons, and we have inflicted enormous costs across the region and across the world in terms of the economy, all to wind up backwards from where we were when this started. It was an enormous mistake to start this war. And as we sit here tonight, Trump still has no idea how to get out of it.
So Donald Trump authorized Iran oil sales and United States cooperation with Iran oil sales as soon as they agreed to the so-called memo of understanding, in which they actually agreed to nothing and did nothing. And now the Treasury is saying, okay, they're going to start to revoke that because of the hostilities that have now broken out. Do you think maybe they should have held back on authorizing Iranian oil sales before Iran had done anything?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you would. I mean, it's problematic to have to pay Iran this much money to open up the Strait of Hormuz. But to pay them that much and then not get anything for it is even worse. Now, I will say, given where we are at, I want this war to end. I want the Strait of Hormuz back open, and I want the Middle East to be out from under the cloud of this conflict. So given that Trump put us in this impossible position, I think we have to cut the best deal we can. But a deal where we give Iran money for nothing in return is not even the best deal that we can give at this impossibly terrible position that Trump put us in to begin with.
I want to listen to one thing Donald Trump said today about the war that he promised to end on the first day of his presidency, and that is, of course, Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine.
It's crazy. And I would like to see, it doesn't affect us. It's really, it's far away. It affects Europe much more. We're there to help Europe, but it doesn't affect the United States. We have an ocean.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, it affects us if we believe in economic and political freedom, if we believe in sovereignty. Because if Russia is able to invade and destroy a sovereign, democratic Ukraine, then that places us all under threat. And also, Russia has threatened more than just Ukraine. They've threatened the Baltics. They've threatened other countries in Europe. And this spreads. I mean, this is the basic principle, after World War I and World War II. Stops the conflicts before they get too big, and they do impact us. us. And in a global economy, this definitely impacts us. But let's also not lose track of the fact that Ukraine is winning this conflict, despite the fact that Trump has done everything in his power to undercut them in the 18 months that he's been in office. If just once Trump and Vance could stand up and say, we're with the sovereign democratic Ukraine against the brutal dictator who invaded them, we're standing with Ukraine instead of criticizing Zelensky and praising Putin, that could put some pressure on Putin. It could actually force him to the table. Look, it was idiotic for Trump to say he could solve the war on day one. As you know, he's prone to just making these statements like, I will magically fix everything. And then for some reason, people don't hold him accountable for it. But as dumb as that was, the worst thing he's done is not be clear that the U.S. stands with Ukraine and their European allies against Putin's brutal aggression in Ukraine. If he had done that, that could put greater pressure on Russia to stop this war.
Congressman Adam Smith, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.
And up next, after this break, I will do my very first segment on this program on Graham Plattner's campaign for Senate in Maine. This will be the first time I have anything to say about his candidacy in Maine. That's next. Because the United States military has been sent to war in Iran by Donald Trump, and because Donald Trump is waging war on democracy in America every day, and because Donald Trump is using the Trump Justice Department in a revenge campaign that we have never seen before, a revenge campaign of attempted false prosecutions, and because Donald Trump's federal invasion forces have tried to take over American cities and shot and killed American citizens who did absolutely nothing to deserve even a single shot fired in their direction, and because of the ongoing worldwide humanitarian disaster created by Donald Trump, destroying the United States Agency for International Development, leaving babies, children of all ages, their parents and grandparents to starve to death. And because also through the destruction of USAID, Donald Trump has taken life-saving medication away from people in a program that had already saved 25 million lives in Africa, a program created by a Republican president. This hour of television, obviously, does not have enough time to cover the details of every political campaign this season and this year. And so we've been very careful about what campaigns we have focused on here. And the reason that this program never once covered the Graham Plattner campaign for Senate in Maine is that those other stories are more important, and that candidate did not appear to me to be the kind of candidate who could make it all the way to November. And so I didn't want to waste this audience's attention on a candidate who might not even be there on Election Day. And at the same time, the Plattner campaign was getting a tremendous amount of coverage everywhere else, and so it didn't really matter in the least whether we covered that campaign here or not, and no one noticed that we didn't. Whenever a new unknown candidate who has never been vetted in any way suddenly surges and creates pundit excitement, I always, from experience, just stay quiet and wait for the vetting. And I knew with a candidacy like Graham Plattner that the vetting would come from the news media. And so it has. And every stage of that vetting, every stage of it has been disturbing. I, for one, did not find any of Graham Plattner's answers to questions about a Nazi tattoo or previous sexist social media comments or accusations by women who had relationships with him, all of which he denied, to be credible at all. I didn't think any of his answers were credible. And I'm in no position to say who is telling the truth in stories now told about Graham Plattner by people who knew him, women who were alone in a room with him. I don't know what happened, but I know, and I've always known, that I cannot believe him. And saying that I never believed Graham Plattner is simply a statement about his own credibility as he addressed these controversies. But his credibility problem for me was always much wider ranging than all of that scandal detail in the reporting about him. The image created by him and by the eager news media was of a humble, roughly educated oyster farmer in Maine who decided he was just mad as hell and couldn't take it anymore, and he was going to step up and save Maine from Donald Trump and Susan Collins, and he could do it because he knew the struggles of the working people of Maine who were being ignored by the Republican policies of Susan Collins and Donald Trump. But he didn't. He's never known those struggles. His most obvious credibility problem to me from the start was saying, quote, I'm a working class guy that lives a working class life. He also said, I've never been close to money and power. And that was a lie. He's a graduate of a private high school, and his father is a rich lawyer, rich enough to give the maximum contribution to a Democratic Senator, Ruben Gallego, who endorsed Graham Plattner, and who has now retracted that endorsement like every other senator who endorsed Graham Plattner. Plattner's grandfather was Warren Plattner, who the New York Times describes as a celebrated architect who designed the dining room of Windows on the World, the storied restaurant atop the World Trade Center, and offices for the Ford Foundation building. Before Mr. Plattner was born, his grandfather also designed an expansive family estate in Connecticut that he said was inspired by a chateau in the Loire Valley of France. Warren Plattner is best known for a namesake line of furniture, including mid-century modern easy chairs that today are priced starting at $15,000. And the oyster farmer thing is true, but it's not exactly the struggling version of oyster farmer. His mother owns a restaurant and is the biggest customer for his oysters. And here's what Graham Plattner knows about the affordability of housing. The New York Times reports property and tax records show he bought the home for $205,000 and received a $200,000 mortgage loan from his father. So his father bought him a house and his mother buys his oysters. I found it very, very difficult to take Graham Plattner's claims about himself seriously after reading those facts about him, publicly available facts. But the enthusiasm kept building and building. And when the New York Times reported that he was really a rich kid, the image of honest oyster farmer somehow just miraculously held. Then came the women accusing him of being abusive, and they were ignored by the Plattner supporters and endorsers because Graham Plattner denied the accusations. Then Monday, a woman offered detail of an encounter with Graham Plattner that she said was non-consensual. And yesterday, that woman told Politico about a night in 2021 when Graham Plattner was, quote, deeply intoxicated and forced himself on her while she repeatedly told him to stop. She said she cut off contact with him after telling him the encounter was not consensual. I remember him grabbing my pelvis and being really forceful of me, she said. I remember the specific moment where I thought to myself, like, this is no longer my choice. And that did it. That report in Politico, using the woman's name, was the breaking point in this story. And here's the big, big problem with that. That same woman had already been an unnamed source in other reporting about Graham Plattner's abusive conduct with women. And she thought what she had said as an unnamed source was clear enough about his aggression with women. But she was ignored. And so the very same person decided that she needed to go public on the record with her name, including in a video interview, and tell the story, tell her story, with all the details of what she says happened to her. And only then did the people who ignored her the first time take her seriously this time, even though Graham Plattner once again denied her accusations. And so it's over tonight. And Graham Plattner is clinging to the wreckage of his campaign, mercilessly and foolishly, dragging out the day and the hour on which he will announce that he cannot find a path forward for his candidacy. And the lesson of it all could not be simpler. It is just one word, and sometimes it's the hardest word for many of us. Patience. It's all it is. When the new exciting candidate emerges, whom no one knows anything about, always just wait. Find the patience to wait for the vetting. The vetting isn't perfect, but vetting is the safest way to place your bets. And when someone has already run for elective office and won, and then maybe run for another office and won or lost that one, that person has, to some degree, been vetted, at least by the news media, repeatedly. The first time I ever saw Barack Obama was when he was a Senate candidate and he appeared on the stage at John Kerry's presidential nominating convention in Boston in 2004. And I heard that man give a speech for the first time. And I said on television that night that I had just seen the first black president. And I also knew that he had been vetted to some degree already. He ran for Congress and lost and went through some vetting in that campaign. And then he ran for state legislature and won and went through more vetting in that process. And now he was running for the United States Senate and going through vetting in that process. And prior to that, he appeared to have lived a careful life, graduating from Columbia University and then from Harvard Law School, where he served as the president of the Harvard Law Review. That proves to you that he was a hard-working, very serious law student in the hardest law school in America. And so this appeared to be a very serious person, aiming his life in a very serious direction. But during his presidential campaign, something terrible could have come out about Barack Obama because he had never been vetted at the presidential level. But nothing bad ever did come out about him. And he was fully vetted as a presidential candidate, not just by his own campaign, but by the Republican campaign that was desperate to try to find something negative to use against the new bright star of the Democratic Party, who turned out to be the real thing, the real bright star that everyone was waiting for, or everyone was hoping for on that side of our politics. But when a candidate emerges like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has never run for anything and is working as a bartender, it's an exciting campaign to watch, but the vetting could maybe turn up something very harmful in her social media history or somewhere. But when it's a woman candidate, it's probably not going to be sexual abuse. And when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won and became a member of Congress, she was then vetted every single day and continues to be vetted every single day by Republicans trying to tear her down. And it turns out that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was also the real thing, that bright, shining star from out of nowhere, never vetted before, who runs for office and wins, and who is who she says she is, a real hardworking bartender who's now a hardworking member of the United States House of Representatives. Graham Plattner was trading on the positive feelings generated by truly great candidates for the offices they were running for, like Barack Obama and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a familiar feeling for Democrats. That's what he was trading on, and he abused that feeling in people. He abused that goodwill extended to him by the people of Maine. And in his video statement last night, he said that he was humbled.
Over the last 10 months, I have been deeply humbled by the faith Mainers have put in me.
And that is Graham Plattner's one and only appearance on this program. And I firmly believe that he was lying when he said that. Applause does not humble people. That is a cliche politician's lie. I am deeply humbled by your adoration. To find a path forward in his life, Graham Plattner is going to have to be finally deeply humbled, possibly for the first time in his life. Failure is an opportunity. Disgrace is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to rebuild. It is an opportunity to look within through humility to find your way forward in life. Graham Plattner tonight is still not deeply humbled enough to find his way out of his campaign. After this break, we will be joined by the Democratic Congresswoman from Maine who did not endorse Graham Plattner, and by the head of Emily's List, an organization that has been saying, listen to these women since the first story broke about women and Graham Plattner. That's next. Emily's List was founded 41 years ago to advance and support the political candidacies of women after a few hundred years of women being banned from elective office in America from the colonial period onward. Today, Emily's List posted this. When women raise the alarm, listen. Graham Plattner's behavior is disqualifying, as we have said this whole damn time, and he should end his campaign. Joining us now is Jessica Mackler, president of Emily's List. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. What has it been like for you watching the evolution of this story from the first time women came out to make accusations about Graham Plattner?
Thanks, Lawrence, for having me. And I want to begin first by acknowledging the women who have bravely come forward to tell their stories and note that they never should have been put in this position in the first place. We knew long ago that Graham Plattner's behavior and his record was disqualifying, and yet we had to go through all of this, as you so clearly laid out, in order to get to this point. But it's been incredibly frustrating, I have to say, because we did know months ago that Graham Plattner's behavior, his record, it was disqualifying in this race. And frankly, we're living right now with the consequences of a man who has an incredible audacity to think his past actions would not catch up with him, but also with people who take a real devil-may-care approach to candidate recruitment, who sought a vibes candidate at all costs, who overlooked time and again problematic behavior, and even argued that we have to overlook that behavior in order to win. And we are seeing right now that that was reckless and it was wrong, and it's far past time for Graham Plattner to get out of this race.
What is, you have your own process in endorsing candidates. Does that include vetting or some sort of examination of vetting?
Absolutely. Vetting is an incredibly important part of the process. But, you know, the thing is, Lawrence, we really have to start, we think about how we recruit candidates. It really starts by being rooted in a strategy of how we win elections. What does it take to win an election? In this election, like many across the country, women voters matter greatly to a candidate's chance of success in a general election. And so when we think about the past behavior of a candidate, when we look at what they've done over the course of their career, we really want to be thinking about that in the context of what is it going to take to win this election? But at Emily's List, we've been doing that for years. We know how to recruit. It starts with that strategy to win. It includes that vetting process. And then it's also doing the work to set these candidates up for success. Again, not just relying on vibes to carry us.
So this reporting by Jonathan Chaitin, this is public information, but he reviewed some of the history of this in The Atlantic, and he quotes Morris Katz, who said this about meeting. He's basically helped recruit Graham Plattner. And he said this: within a few minutes of talking to him, I was like, this guy owes it to the country to run for Senate. What would you say to Morris Katz?
Well, again, we're living right now with the consequences, very severe electoral consequences of a reckless approach to recruitment. But beyond that, the other thing that we see and we've seen throughout the past several months and in this cycle is a really lazy assumption about what it looks like to connect with voters. This idea that it takes men with big burly beards to connect to working class voters, it's just wrong. And we have candidates, thousands of candidates all over the country every day that are demonstrating that and don't come with this disqualifying and problematic behavior.
Jessica Mackler, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And joining us now is Maine Democratic Congresswoman Chellie Pingree. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I know this is a difficult time in Maine for all of you. Why did you not endorse Graham Plattner even after he won the nomination?
Well, just to be clear, I don't endorse in Democratic primaries. Too many of my friends are in Democratic primaries. And I did campaign alongside him once the governor dropped out of the race. So I don't want to be disingenuous about that. I believe we've got a big tent party and we should all work together. And so I've been campaigning with Graham Plattner since our convention and since it was clear he was going to be the nominee. And I understand the deeply conflicted time we're in Maine. I mean, I'm a progressive. I want more progressives in the Senate. And the kind of message he was talking about and the way that voters were perceiving how he would bring something different was very conflicting for people. They'd see these reports of what had gone on, the New York Times stories or the tattoo or the Reddit posts, and they'd say, hey, that doesn't sit right with me, but I want somebody to talk about income equality and organizing unions and childcare and healthcare and all the things that I believe in and he was talking about. So it's been a very challenging time for a lot of voters, for a lot of women who felt conflicted about this. Obviously, this is now a bridge too far. And even the people from the outside who've been coming into our state are now saying no. I mean, one of the things that I'm concerned about, you brought it up and you just talked about that a little in the segment about the recruitment here, the lack of vetting, but also the way we feel a little bit in Maine is like, leave us alone in our state. We're good at this stuff. We can figure out how to run an election. We have good candidates. We have people who run. And sometimes this, the outside consultants, all the outside interests, even some of my colleagues who treat us like a petri dish. Oh, I'm going to go to Maine and I'm going to be basking in the glory of whoever's running up there. Yeah, it's a big, important race. It's a really challenging time, and the path to Democratic majority in the Senate runs through this Senate race. But it doesn't mean it's everybody's else state to try to take over and decide how we should do this. And that even relates to now as we choose our next candidate and use our Democratic convention process or some sort of process to bring as many people into that decision. We don't need a lot of outsiders to tell us who the next candidate should be. We've got to make this decision, and it's a tough one.
There are reports that Graham Plattner is trying to be the one who decides who the candidate should be. What do you know about that?
Well, I've heard from the executive director of the party who's just gone public saying that's true. And we've heard that too, that's why he has yet to drop out of the race, even though, virtually all of the supporters and advocacy groups have backed away now, liberal groups and others who have said it's time for you to step down and let us move forward in this process. I mean, this is a critical race. We need to get that process set up. And there is no scenario by which a person who leaves a race, takes their name off the ballot, gets to pick who the next person is. It doesn't work that way. And I know they're trying to, sort of spin it as, well, the voters chose us and we should have that same, we don't have time to run another primary in our state. We'll probably have to use something like our convention process with the delegates who have, been out there in every county in our state doing actual things. We're not going to have a backroom deal. I mean, I don't have a say in this matter. And, the DSCC, nobody from the outside gets a say in this matter. This is the Maine Democratic Party and the delegates who work hard at county committees and local picnics and show up for the bake sales and have been doing that, for years. They get to make this decision. They're the ones who, organize the election. And the majority of them are probably Plattner supporters. So it's not as if, there's some inside cabal that's going to make this decision. So it's very important that we do it that way, I think. And the Democratic Party, who's never been faced with a candidate replacement at this scale before, is working as fast as they can to figure out a fair process to do that.
Have you talked to Graham Plattner about this?
Not since he dropped out. Ironically, we saw each other a couple of weeks ago at an event, and we were scheduled to have dinner tomorrow. So we were going to talk about some of the things going forward in the campaign. I don't think there's a going forward in the campaign. So no, I haven't. But if I need to, I will give him a call.
Well, if you gave him a call tonight, what would be the timing you would suggest to him about his decision, about his announcement?
Yesterday?
Okay.
I mean, it's time. I mean, I think it's very clear, and I think he even made somewhat clear in his video that it's clear that he's not likely to win this race at this point in time. And he has until the 13th, that's true. But then we only have 2 weeks to put all this together. So I think the sooner the better. If he feels there's a legitimate reason to, drag it out for a week, I'd like to know what it is, because at this point, everybody who has been supporting him, including the other members of the United States Senate and the advocacy groups who have been there, have withdrawn their support. So it's time to let us move forward on this. And yes, we will choose a good candidate. There's a very good likelihood that given the state party's makeup, we will have a progressive candidate going forward, but we can't move forward on that. Although the candidates are, starting their committees and showing the likelihood of their interest in running. Many of them were in the governor's race or, in other races. And so they've been out there campaigning and they want to get going. They want to have this process going, and we've got to schedule something, or the state party needs to schedule something, but when's it actually going to happen?
Maine Congresswoman Chellie Pingree, thank you very much for joining us again tonight.
Thanks for your interest.
Thank you. And coming up, nearly 1 million investors lost a total of $3.8 billion on Trump crypto coin. That's in a New York Times investigation, and that's next. Yesterday, the most corrupt president in history said this.
They dropped all investigations of everybody. They allowed people to come out of jail. And every time I see a crypto guy where they dropped an investigation, I said, "You're lucky I'm president."
Joining us now is Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times investigative reporter Eric Lipton, who is following the money in the Trump family business, including the Trump crypto business. Eric, how lucky is the crypto industry that Donald Trump is president, and how lucky have investors been in Donald Trump's cryptocurrency?
I mean, it's not lucky that the folks who were accused of violating federal securities laws, it's a matter of a decision made by the president and his appointee to the Securities Exchange Commission that many of these enforcement actions were shut down. It's not a matter of luck. It's a matter of it's a conflict of interest, because at the same time as he and his sons helped co-found, a crypto company that is making him, hundreds of millions of dollars, he is appointing the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission that is setting policies that affect his own company. And what we found, it's data that's prepared by an analytical group called Nansen that we've worked with to try to analyze just what are the profits and losses from the Trump meme coin, for example, which is a kind of a collectible that was set up on January 17th, a few days before he became president for the second time. And what the data shows is that there was a total of 1.48 million wallets, effectively investors who placed a bet on that meme coin, and 988,000 of them have lost money. So that's 2 out of 3 have lost money. And cumulatively, that's $3.81 billion has been lost by nearly 1 million investors who thought that they should follow the lead of the president. And the people who made money, most of them made these investments in the first hours after the meme coin was put on the market. And these are people who know that it's a kind of a pump and dump scheme where you got to get in quickly and you get out quickly. And then the people that come in behind them, they're kind of exit liquidity. That's the term they use in the industry, exit liquidity. They just are the way out for the people who are scoring the profits. And then the rest of them become losers. So you've got almost 1 million losers who lost a cumulative total of nearly $4 billion. Many of them are followers of Trump and decided to make this investment, driven by the president, who was on social media saying, basically follow me, and this is we're all going to be winners. But it turns out he's the winner. He made hundreds of millions of dollars, but almost 1 million people who followed him have lost almost $4 billion.
And he continues to promote this publicly.
Yeah, I mean, one thing he did say yesterday during his appearance at the White House was one of the reasons that he embraced crypto was he realized there was a big constituency, potentially of voters, people that might, be willing to pursue, supporting him, because they were disaffected with, banking and with the financial system in the United States, and this was a constituency that he could grab onto, and it's also a way that his family could make a lot of money. So. Yeah, I mean, I think that there was a lot of people who took a bet based on his suggestions, and they've ended up basically financially as losers.
Eric Lipton, thank you for joining us once again on this important coverage.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Eric Lipton gets tonight's last word.